Hey everybody, I see people are filtering in. I'm just going to give another 30 seconds and then we'll kick off today's session. Thanks for joining. Okay, let's kick off. Everybody, welcome and thank you very much for joining us today on this webinar. Today's session, we're going to be focusing on navigating NHS integrated care systems funding, how to leverage procurement trends to avoid mistakes and win more contracts. So we know it's a busy time coming into the end of the quarter, so we're going to keep this session punchy and informative. You're going to hear from 3 speakers, and then we're going to follow this up with a live Q&A, so do stick around. We're going to share a QR code very shortly as well on screen, so have your cameras at the ready so you can scan that, and then you can drop in questions as we're going along anytime during the session, and we'll address those in the Q&A. For those that haven't met me, my name is Delon Ryan. I am the Data and Research Manager at Stotles. My role really is all about translating the procurement data that we collect and turning it into actionable insights for our customers and for the wider team to use. I'm joined today by Dom Bennett and Liam Cahill, so I'm going to pass over to both of those and they can introduce themselves. So Dom, if you'd like to kick off first, and then bring in Liam.
Sure. Yeah. Hey everyone. I'm Dom Bennett. I'm an account executive here at Stotles, so working on the team to sort of support people who are selling into public sector, and also sort of my background is as an ex-account executive selling into the NHS. So hopefully, really, my aim for this session is to bring some of my personal experience and experience for people that I speak to every day to sort of flesh out some really actionable strategies that people can take to sort of navigate NHS funding and hopefully win more business.
Hello, my name's Liam. I work on both sides of the system. I've spent 20 years working in and around the NHS, building a national organisation, scaling it up, and advise probably about 50 to 60 health tech companies, most of the great and the good, across the board. But although if it's not you, then you may still be great or good. It's no judgment, or maybe it's not, I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to be here today to sort of talk about 1, this landscape, and then 2, doing it well at the end.
Fantastic, thanks guys. Great, so in case this is your first time on one of these webinars, in case you haven't heard of us, Stotles is the platform for doing business with government. So we're a UK-based venture-backed company of around 60 people now, and we're headquartered in London around Barbican Station. Our message and our mission is simple. We want to help suppliers identify, qualify, nurture, and win more public sector pipeline faster. How we do this, we bring millions of unstructured and structured data points across hundreds of public sources into one place for suppliers so that they can create the strategy, build pipeline, track tenders, and win bids. And I guess, our experience and from working closely with these suppliers has really given us a unique lens into what's working and then what's not working in public sector sales. So that's really what we'll be getting into today. So today's session is all about practical insights for selling into the NHS, and we have 2 key goals. First being breaking down how funding flows through the 42 ICSs. And the second one being sharing clear tactics for approaching NHS budgets with confidence. So yeah, we're going to cover these 4 practical topics you can see on the screen. So that's, the NHS's ICS structure, themes and considerations across the 42 ICSs, supplier pitfalls and solutions, and then concrete strategies to win. But if this doesn't cover all of your questions, all of your burning questions right now, we will have a live Q&A at the end, as I mentioned before. And on the next slide, we'll have the QR code. So as I said, have your phones at the ready to scan that. And here we go. So if you have your phone, scan the QR code. Otherwise, you can go onto slido.com and you can enter in that code you see on the screen on the page, and you can join our Slido polling and Q&A, I guess, setup. How we're going to kick off this session on the next slide. We will ask a question, which is, what is your level of public sector experience? And I guess we asked this question to really sort of like, I guess, gauge temperature and figure out who is in the room with us today. So, you know, we might have people here who are brand new to the public sector, brand new to NHS, brand new to ICSs, and haven't won any contracts yet. On the flip side, maybe you've dipped your toes, won a couple of contracts. Maybe you're seasoned public sector professionals, and this is just merely a bit of a check-in to see what Dom and Liam have to say. And maybe you're gathering speed. So yeah, I'll just leave this open for a couple of moments. And really this will help us shape our points later in the webinar. Okay, great. It seems like seasoned public sector professionals are here, so that's very positive. Gaining steam, it's good to see. And leave it open for another 5 seconds. Okay, nice. Well, it's very positive. Seems like people have sort of know what they're up to. If I move on to the next slide with one more, this is a bit more of a fun one. I guess we're looking for emojis that best describes your understanding of the structure of the NHS. So, for example, if I see a crying face, there you go, a confused face, I know some things are wrong or unsure. However, yeah, there you go. However, if I see like a laughing face, it could be positive, it could be negative. If I see a smiley face, I'm going to assume it's positive. Haven't seen many positive smiley faces here yet, but it's looking good. I'm not sure how you guys will work these into your conversation, but here we are. Okay, real mixed bag. Don't want this. The snail for slowness, maybe. Confusion. See a wizard. Wow. Okay, fabulous. So I think we have a good idea of the people in the room with us today and the emotions that this topic is bringing up. So what I might do then is, off the back of this, pass over to Liam Cahill to get us started. So Liam, please fire ahead.
Yeah, so when we started planning this about 4 weeks ago, the world was a little bit different, right? I was at the back of this, and so sort of bookended me in this session in order to kind of help to cover it. If we go to the next slide. I think, let's be honest, 2025 is shaping up to be a year, and they say it's good to live in interesting times, but I think some of us would like a break after the last few years, and a break is not what we're getting. So, look, what I'm not going to do is kind of go through and explain all of the structure of the system and how it works. Obviously, there's local integrated care systems, of which the statutory organisation is ICBs, and there will be trusts and different forms of providers, practices, PCNs, and so on within their footprint. Hopefully, most of you will have a good view of what these are. Next slide. But there's a lot changing. And I think, you know, if you're my client, you've probably been on the phone to me going, what does it mean? What does it mean? There's all this stuff going on. And understandable. I've spent a lot of time writing during this time about what it does mean and trying to take my views. But, you know, I think what I'd like to do is just kind of talk through some of the key things that are kind of changing and then actually what this means in terms of it. So we can actually set this up for the year ahead, because we are looking to a year ahead, but there's much change and a lot of uncertainties around that. Well, the NHS thing has been pre-abolished. It's been abolished in words, but realistically, this is a run up to December to 2 years. Obviously, there's 50% cuts that were planned in NHS England and sort of probably about half that in Department of Health and Social Care. So there's a merger expected and cuts too. Just to be clear, I don't think this will probably impact most of you. Initially, it's kind of like, sort of the greater absence of an absent father, I guess, in this sense, like, like realistically in this, that like for the majority of you, NHS England are not providing contracts. Yes, maybe they're providing structure, but actually the bigger news for me, and probably for most of you that you should be observing, because it will impact on other parts of the system, is the fact that integrated care boards have been asked to cut their operating costs by 50% in order to try and take out £750 million of money. That's the general expected. Now, this is probably going to relate to about 50% job cuts because they've been squeezing and there isn't a lot of sort of fat on the bone at the moment after 15 years of austerity. This is going to have an impact, and this will probably impact you. If you're saying to trusts, less so, but it will play a role in a number of ways. The trusts have been told to cut business roles, but this doesn't have a target, it doesn't have a feature. And to be totally honest, given the whole top table of the NHS has just been filled by trust CEOs, and trusts are very powerful entities, I would say there's probably a lot of negotiating going on behalf of trusts now in order to make this the case. I think that trusts will be a bit more protected. I think they'll still have to achieve their cost improvement program targets, but generally I think like they'll be much smaller because not everybody can be absolutely slammed in bureaucracy, and they're probably considered to be less bureaucratic out of the group anyway. Bunch of quangos are to go, so that's quasi-autonomous non-government organisation. Probably won't be CQC, could be, you never know. But I think there's a number of organisations that have been created. They kind of sit standalone and they'll go. Penny Dash is currently going through with a red pen to decide which ones will sink and which ones will swim. The thing that I want to just talk to you about here is there's lots of noise and there's lots of politics, and it's very easy to get caught up with this and kind of go like, what does it mean, right? Be cognizant of the noise. Like, I think there's definitely going to be a war on bureaucracy, red tape and gatekeeping, but actually the most important thing is noise isn't always substance. And actually, as we go to the next slide, we'll see that this is what you should be really thinking about as you go through. So firstly, we don't have a strategy yet, and it's very hard to know the impact on you and what that's going to be in the strategy, because we broadly know what it's going to cover, but we don't know what it's necessarily going to mean. So the NHS 10-year plan, they say May, they've kind of also said June a little bit, but I think it'll be May. The first draft should be written probably within a month, actually, probably within about 3 weeks. And hopefully what we'll start hearing is a bit of a political lead up where we'll start to get some noise on some more tangible aspects, which will give us a little bit of information. Again, it'll all be surrounded and shrouded by noise, and we won't get the detail until we get the strategy. But to be honest, I think it depends on how much lobbying and pushing back it is on whether it's May or June. More Quango abolishment, not going to spend any more time on that. And the key thing I think around integrated care boards and systems here, particularly with the ICBs and they're reducing their operating spend, is that they've been told they need to cut the money, but they're still independent organisations. So I think there's two elements on this. One, what is their role going to be? So what's the ICB? Because some may cut jobs, some may do it in other areas, some may merge, and generally all of the yellow brick road always leads to job cuts for most of this because it's most of their spend. But we don't know exactly what's going to happen in each independent area and whether areas are going to club together. Most of the expectation is that we'll actually start to see 42 kind of maybe get close to 30, which tends to happen in these cycles. Like, this is my third NHS reform. So this will probably filter down over the coming months as we start to see their local plans and what they're doing. So you need to factor this in. So this is something that many of you should monitor, and I know from talking to Stotles that they're going to be looking at this and monitoring it, and I'd imagine that there'll probably be more stuff probably sort of come May or June about this. But at the moment, the short answer is we don't explicitly know about some of these elements. So I'll hand back over and see you at the end.
Cheers, Liam. Fabulous introduction. Look forward to you popping back in a short while and getting into the weeds and everything else. So thanks very much. I guess before Dom jumps into the pitfalls and solutions for suppliers, I'm just going to walk through a couple of short slides highlighting some themes across the 42 ICSs, and then I guess some considerations as well. And I guess this here is a catch-all slide. So if you remember anything from the next 5 and 10 minutes, this is it. It might sound obvious, but funding signals demand. So using budget documents and funding trends are crucial for aligning with buyer priorities. Know what's being procured and by whom. Understand who's buying what to target effectively so that you can focus on active spenders and high-value opportunities. Understand your supplier's ecosystem, so you can be strategic about partners and competitors to position yourself smartly when opportunities arise. And then finally, know the preferred procurement routes of your target buyers. So I guess The NHS uses multiple channels, a mix of frameworks, dynamic markets, and direct awards. So knowing how they buy and being in the right place at the right time is crucial. So with that said, let's jump in to each of those in a little bit more detail. So while it can be fragmented and a quite a slow process, I guess published NHS procurement plans are a great first step in building an NHS sales strategy and moving towards a more structured way of selling and away from the scattergun approach. So if we take last year's spring budget as an example, this signaled how much funding was allocated to health and social care as a whole, with the bulk of this being distributed amongst the NHS and then onto ICSs. So I guess in the 2024-2025 period, 127.2 billion from the NHS budget went to ICSs, and our research showed that 40% of these ICSs reported budget increases compared with the previous period. Why does this matter? I guess more funding means more tenders, more contracts, and more procurement momentum, whereas less funding means delays, contract consolidation, and cost-saving priorities. So understanding this direction of spend really helps suppliers focus where the opportunity is real. I guess the chart on the right-hand side here is a callback to the winners and the losers of the, I guess, ICS allocations last year. You can see up on top, North Central London's ICB was up 153.5 million to a total of 482.5 million. Whereas South East London's ICB, the capital budget went down 119.7 million, which obviously would limit new projects. Why this matters? So I guess you'd want to prioritize growth areas to find procurement potential. You should be aligning your offering with investment priorities and then targeting these viable buyers as well. Focus your outreach on regions with active budgets. I guess once you've identified which ICSs are receiving money, the next step is to understand how they are spending it. And I guess this is key to building a really targeted data-driven sales strategy and not a broad, inefficient one. I guess at Stotles, we're collecting a lot of procurement data from hundreds of different public sources, and our analysts are cleaning and segmenting this to uncover market trends. For this example, we analyzed 2,000 award notices from last year, and here you can see a collection of key categories based on CPV codes tied to awarded contracts that we've analyzed. I guess CPV codes are broad, but they're quite useful for high-level insights and can help suppliers quickly spot areas of opportunity. Now, beyond CPV codes, keyword extraction from contract titles and descriptions gives some sharper insights. So what we did was we ran a second-level analysis on this to get a second level or another angle. And this really helped us dig deeper into what buyers were procuring across these very much like health services related CPV codes. By doing this, we found that acute services and primary and urgent care were among the top keywords. However, awards for IT services, consulting, repair and maintenance, and information systems also showed that there were other areas of importance during this time, not directly related to these healthcare services. Once again, this is important to suppliers because looking at trends around CPV codes and keywords helps you get closer to the contracts. And I guess with this intel, suppliers can be more strategic, more efficient, and more successful in NHS procurement. Great. So I guess mapping your market, being aware of your market's landscape. Yeah, it's not just about what ICSs are spending on, it's about who they are spending with. So tracking which suppliers are consistently winning with NHS businesses can inform both competitors and partner strategies. I guess some questions to ask yourself: do you regularly compete with these top suppliers? If so, do they have any expiring contracts coming up that you can position for? If not, competitors, maybe you should consider some partnership opportunities. So yeah, whether they're partners you work with or would like to work with, or whether they're competitors, supplier intelligence is crucial to sharpen your strategy. So sometimes it's I guess important to think about partnerships and not just competition. So from research into ICSs, we found that around 8% of suppliers won more than one contract in this past year. And we sort of find that these sticky suppliers have built buyer trust and maybe the next or the best route into the market, especially if you're an SME. So we found that around 15% of winners in this past year were SMEs. So maybe partnering with established suppliers is a fast track to market. And then before I pass over to Dom, I just want to leave you one last thought. So it's easy to focus on who has budget and what they're spending on, but it's just as important to understand where the spending is happening. So I guess while direct tenders account for the majority of NHS contracts over the past year that we analysed, frameworks and dynamic markets also play a critical role, especially around these high volume buyers. So if your buyers are using frameworks, but you're only chasing direct tenders, you could be missing a significant chunk of the market. So to bring this to life, we've included a screenshot of some frameworks on our platform. In particular, the CCS National Framework for Clinical and Healthcare Staffing is currently live. It's valued at £5 billion and includes over 300 suppliers across 6 lots. So I guess if your competitors are on it and your NHS buyers are using it, you need to be tracking this and positioning accordingly. There's also another opportunity for developing partnerships, as I mentioned before. And yeah, I guess staying ahead of renewal cycles ensures you don't miss out on these high value NHS opportunities. And also with the Procurement Act in play, reshaping procurement routes, being proactive about frameworks is essential to staying competitive. So I guess with that said, and a bit of an introduction into the next section, I'm going to pass over to Dom, who will get into more details on, I guess, practical details and the execution of these strategies. Okay, Dom, feel free to take it away.
Thanks, Alan. I'm just going to take over screen share here. So bear with me 1 second. Can I just double check with you guys? You can see my screen okay? That's coming up, right?
Not right now.
Technical difficulties. Let's try this again.
Great.
How about now? Perfect.
Yeah, crystal.
Lovely. Okay, yeah, so really for my section, I'm going to keep it relatively brief before handing over to Liam to really dig into the weeds of sort of what he touched on at the start there. I want to focus really on what we've seen in the market and from my own experience are some of the key pitfalls, challenges that suppliers are seeing, and then some of the solutions to address these and to approach the market and the NHS in a really like structured and effective way. So firstly, there are obviously a lot of pitfalls, a lot of challenges with selling into the NHS. It's a very ever-shifting market. Like Liam said, this is the 3rd NHS restructure he's seen. Even in my time selling into the NHS, which was only for 3 years, I saw 2 major restructures. And I think what I really want to zero in on here is, while it's a very changing market, if you can approach it in the right way, there is opportunity, as long as you're avoiding these key pitfalls. And so some of the key ones that I saw in my own experience, and then also that I've seen from speaking to people that are selling into the NHS day to day, is not knowing where to focus your time can be a really, really big issue. So where we have, across the NHS, 42 ICSs, 215 trusts, you can't approach the market in this sort of, like Dallin was saying, scattergun way of just blasting everyone with outreach and hoping something sticks. It's not a very efficient use of time, and not everyone's going to be in the market for your specific solution at any one time. So we see suppliers sort of struggling with this and trying to target every single ICS, every single person at every single ICS and NHS trust, when really what you want to be doing is zeroing in and focusing your time on the most high value opportunities. Within this vein, as well as making sure that you're qualifying opportunities well. So something that I was guilty of, and I do see other people being guilty of as well, is approaching sort of specific opportunities where you think that you have an opportunity to get your software, your product, your service into a specific account, and you sink loads of time, loads of effort, loads of work trying to build relationships within this account. And then it comes to the procurement stage, comes to tender, and they either renew with their incumbent or a competitor comes in out of nowhere that you weren't even aware of. And that's the nightmare scenario, really, because you've sunk loads of time and effort into this opportunity, but ultimately you've lost it because you hadn't fully qualified and didn't understand the full picture within the account and within the opportunity itself. On a slightly different vein, but I do still think quite connected, is this sort of reactive sales process. And this is a pitfall that we see suppliers run into very often, but can also go hand in hand with not knowing where to focus your time. So if you are approaching the market and just going scattergun to everyone, what you do also see is if you're not aware of where opportunities are going to be and focusing your time on them proactively, you end up getting blindsided by tenders that on paper are quite relevant to you, but you didn't know they were coming out, and you then have only a couple of weeks to put a good bid together. And again, in the sort of incumbent supplier or competitor landscape side of this, quite often things that I ran into as well is you see a tender come out, you see on paper it's a great fit, but as you start to dig into the tender submission and go through some of these questions, you realize, okay, actually this is calling out things that are directly related to my competitor, and I don't feel like this has actually been written for me to be able to win. It's almost locking me out of this. So that's a really big pitfall, and somewhere where we do see people losing out is not having a full pulse on what's going to be coming down the pipeline ahead of time and just reacting to tenders. You end up just spinning your wheels and wasting a lot of time. And then sort of the last one that I really did struggle with as well when I was selling into NHS was uncertainty about the right decision maker. So when we are approaching these accounts, even if we know which accounts are our best fit accounts and which opportunities are the most highly qualified, we want to make sure that the people we're reaching out to in these accounts are the people behind the scenes making the decisions and coming sort of out to that procurement decision. Because uncertainty about this just means you're either blasting the wrong people with the wrong messaging or stuck either at the lower levels of end users and not actually being able to influence those procurement decisions. So why do we need a strong strategy to sell to the NHS? I think this graphic demonstrates it really well. Really what we're looking at here is a very simple graphic of a sales funnel. And this is off of some analysis and work that we did with a number of our customers to try to understand what their success rates were like at the different funnel entry points within their sales cycle. So many of them, when we were looking at opportunities that were in that very reactive approach, where they hadn't really engaged before that came out to tender, they had very, very low win rates, and that ends up in a massive amount of wasted work. If we've got less than 4% win rates, over 95% of these bids that we're spending days, even weeks of multiple people on the team's time to write, it's completely written off. Whereas if we're pre-engaging, if we're building relationships, we're really pinpointing and being strategic about where we focus our time, we see those funnel win rates massively increase. So I think this is a really good demonstration of why we need to be very strategic and proactive in our approach. And now what I want to do very quickly is run into what I see as sort of the key three-step process to achieve that. And we can actually run through some practical examples within Stotles as well. So the first of this three-step process, I see the three steps as identify, qualify, and action. And it's a really good way to sort of approach the market and make sure that you're only spending your time on your best fit opportunities and then understanding the full picture before you actually reach out. The first step is identifying early buying signals. And I think Dallin did touch on a few of these. So understanding budget within accounts is crucial, especially as they're being slashed. You need to understand where there is strategy and budget that is aligned to the services or products you can provide. And then another one is going to be upcoming contract expiries. And really what we want to be doing here is taking that sort of wide view of the whole NHS, focusing down on what's most relevant to us, and then being able to outreach to these people. So if I just come through to Stotles here, in the vein of identifying the most relevant opportunities here, what I'm looking at here is a view of Stotles from the point of view of a sort of EPR provider within the NHS. And the idea of these keywords is to make sure that, yes, we're taking that wide blue ocean of the full NHS, but focusing down and sort of casting our net on the opportunities that are most relevant to us. We can also track our competitive landscape and our partners as well, so that we understand the full picture within any account and opportunity, so we can then qualify and understand that we are spending our time in the best place. So if we come through to the platform here, what we're looking at now is a view of currently live contracts in the market that are relevant to those keywords that we set up. And we can start to use these, and our most successful suppliers do this on a day-to-day basis to understand where specific procurement opportunities could be coming down the pipeline in the future, so we can proactively reach out to them. So if we take this one, for example, we can see that we've got an EPR opportunity here within Liverpool University Trust that's expiring in a few months' time. And if we want to then save this, we can decide to create this as a new opportunity and start to track this within our funnel and build out the full picture in this account. So this is one way to identify. The other would be through buyer documents. And this is something that Dallin touched on there as well. So with this, we are pulling through all of the documents across the NHS. Here we're looking at some specific ICB documents. And again, filtering them by those keywords to make sure we're pulling out the most relevant parts of these to our products and services. So we can also then filter these down by specific document types. So maybe in the vein of this, we want to be looking at strategies and budgets. And if we have a look at Cheshire and Merseyside here, we can actually start to understand more of a picture of the specific budgets that are available for EPR development based on this account that we were already interested in. So from here, we can now start to flesh out, okay, we've actually got 2 buying signals within this one account. I would say this is a really good place for myself, if I'm an EPR supplier, to be focusing my time and to start to qualify and understand the full picture within this account. So ultimately, the next step here, right, is to qualify this account and the opportunity. So we've got some really strong early buying signals. We think there's a good chance that we could potentially win within this account. And now we want to understand a bit more about this buyer's procurement history, about the existing incumbent supplier, the competitive and partner landscape as well within the account. So the way we can do this is by looking at a buyer profile. So here we're looking at Liverpool University Hospitals Trust and start to understand the full picture of their previous spend, what that's broken down to within those CPV codes that Dallin was speaking about, to really get the high level on what specific areas they have invested in the past. We can see that specific upcoming expiry here, but we can also see that that is held by one of our direct competitors. From the qualification point of view here, I can actually notice, okay, they've only actually won this contract once previously. It was a one-off. So the chances of them potentially going for another supplier could be quite high. This would be a reason for me to qualify in, and I would take this into account when I'm then sort of reaching out to people within this account. I can also see a few of my partners are embedded within this account. So this can be an opportunity either, for things like Bytes, where they're software resellers. Potentially that could be a good way in if they've used Bytes in the past, or at least for a warm introduction into this account. I can then actually look at the documents specifically for this buyer and start to understand if there's any snippets and small parts of information that I can use, both in qualifying the budget more directly, but also to use in my outreach when I'm speaking to people within this account. So here we can see, again, they've got investment, and this is directly within their sort of business plan for the upcoming year, to be switching to this new electronic patient record, working with partners across the ICB like we saw in the ICB document directly. So now we've identified this opportunity. We've qualified, yes, this is a good use of our time, and we have the full picture. The last step here is to action. So really, to be sort of proactive in our engagement in the market, we want to make sure we're reaching out to the right people within this account as well. And using all of this information that we have gleaned along this sort of process to make sure that we're coming with the right messaging and aligning ourselves to the strategies of these key decision makers as well. So with that in mind, we will have the key decision maker contact of people within this account, and we can start to both save them to that same opportunity to really track everything through our funnel, but also start to build outreach. So maybe we want Chief Digital Information Officer. He could be quite a good person to outreach to here. We can start to build our outreach in ways that are, relevant to our products and services. So we can mention some of our products and services here, and maybe we want to mention a few specific things that we got through our research of the account. They work with one of our partners. They have an existing contract with a competitor, and maybe some case studies or other information we want. And then building out this full picture, what this will do is get teams maybe 80% of the way there to start to build outreach in a way that's highly relevant to the key decision makers within this account and really aligned to the products and services we can provide, our experience, but also the strategy within this account. And based off of sort of this exact process, this is some of the success that some of our clients have seen with approaching public sector market and the NHS specifically. And just before I pass over to Liam for his section to get into the weeds, I think if there's anything to take away from sort of the actionable things you can do to approach the market in a strategic way, this 3-step process of identify, qualify, and action is a really good way to approach. And ultimately, it comes down to finding the right opportunity and then speaking to the right person at the right time. So we want to make sure we're leveraging the data. We want to understand their priorities, their strategic objectives, what the competitive landscape is like within the account. And like Dallin was saying, the routes to market, whether that's dynamic markets or frameworks as well. And then proactively reach out and build relationships with buyers, establishing yourself as a trusted advisor, using that information from their budgets and strategies. So yeah, as always, we are here to help. And off the back of this webinar, if there is anything that you would like to see more, if you want to see some specific examples, we can customize them as well relevant to you and create, we're calling it a battle pack. So we can find some specific contract expiries, some industry reports, some key frameworks for you to go after, ultimately to hopefully help you build some pipeline and win some business within the NHS. So now I'll just hand over to Liam for his section. Thanks.
Cool. Well, hopefully we'll get a bit of weeds and a bit of fruits as well, right? Like, so it's a mix of things, the shoots, the weeds, and the fruit. So yeah, I'm going to be trying to talk about how to win. And I guess, a couple of pieces of information before we kind of go in. The first one is, like, I've scaled an organisation to 100% and I've won, and I learned many things the hard way. And the NHS is harder than when I won the NHS. And I found every year I've been having to raise my game with my clients and my organisations and what I'm doing to make sure that we're reaching up to this high bar. The second thing I'm going to tell you is I absolutely love Stotles. And I'm not saying this because I've ever received a penny from them. I never received a penny from them. For absolute transparency, I've been given a bottle that my 8-year-old son has bashed the hell out of and looks like it's a sort of been in a road traffic accident. And I've received some very nice Tony's Chocolonely chocolate from them at some various points. But actually, with my clients and using it, I think it's a really great tool. And I think actually, it's not even one tool; it's a series of tools. And so, the first thing I'd say is that everything Stotles is doing, I think particularly some of the latter things that Dom was illustrating, very much tie in with what I try to advocate with organizations about how to do well, how to win, not how to just do enough, but how to do more than others around you so you actually win, because that's it, right? If we go to the next slide, right? Like, we've got to realize that if your organization and your strategy is very much built around, we've got a thing, it's a great thing, we're going to find people, we're going to tell them about the thing, and they're going to buy the thing, and then we all high five, then if I'm entirely honest, that's not a strategy, and you're probably going to bleed out and not get anywhere in the NHS, because the NHS requires much more. We have a mountain to climb together, and actually the organisations that are winning, the ones that are on the tips of the tongues, are the ones, and I know them and work with many of them, they're the ones who go further and further and go beyond, that extra mile. And so I think what both of the lads have been talking about so far is proactivity, and not just generally being keen and proactive, but cognizant, conscious proactivity and making sure that you're putting your efforts into being really strategically proactive to do what you do. And I'm going to try and expand upon this because as we started, and I'm going to start talking about the landscape and trying to give a little bit more about this before I talk about concrete strategies. But like, we are in the tightest landscape. We've had 15 years of austerity, and I've surfed the wave all up to this moment in time. You know, 20 years in the system. And it's never been harder than this year that we've got coming, because all of the previous years were hard, and it just ratchets up in terms of difficulty, right? So next slide. So, you know, for you, it's really important to make sure that your understanding is not how to get broken by an NHS. And the reality is that it may not be on merit, it may not be on the quality of your product. You may have something that the NHS needs, but another company down the road is better at getting in there, looking at signals, building relationships, helping to write tenders and so on. And there was a point in for Q&A around like most of the tenders that have been written have been won. And that's how I won all of my tenders. I wrote the tender that I then applied for, you know, and I've been there and I've done that and I've won them, and I won them all because I was in there and I had the relationship and they knew that they wanted what we did before. So the key here is to make sure that we're not getting broken by this NHS, and many very good companies are going to get broken by it. So you need to make sure that you're doing absolutely everything that you can. Move on to the next slide. So let's talk about how broke this system is and what the landscape is. And to be honest, this doesn't necessarily change a huge amount at the moment with all of the noise and strategies. There's just a couple of, these are just a couple of extra sour cherries that maybe sit on top of the cake. So, you know, the first important thing is that the NHS is broke and has been broke for many years. Like realistically, part of the government's work that they're doing at the moment is because the expected overspend for this coming financial year was about 6.7 to 7 billion pounds, which I think accounts for around about 3% of the budget. Now, 3% may not seem like a lot, but in this fiscal landscape with 20 million black holes and stuff like that, the government has very clearly said, well, we are not going to let you overspend anymore. And actually, in real terms, given they've allowed that year on year, that's actually a cut. So systems, and for someone who put in the comments around the difference between ICBs and systems, firstly, you need to learn this as quickly as you humanly can, and I'll explain some ways that you can do too, right? But an integrated care system is a collection of organisations working locally. An integrated care board is the statutory organisation that is required to deliver that. I tend to talk more in ICBs because they are your customer and they are your funder, right? They are the ones who are going to have to cut staff. They're the ones whose budget we're looking at. The system is the collection of the different entities who are set to work together. And I can't, like, you know, my teaching session around this takes an hour and 10 minutes to go through all of the different components. We don't have that time. So systems are and have been cutting spend. And actually, this often goes towards digital and core target work. You know, over the last couple of years, what we've had is literally letters from the government saying, yes, this is a priority, but cut in this area because it's not critical enough, things like virtual wards and stuff like that. And we've had this over the last couple of years. So things that might be in a policy document as a priority might also be areas that the CFO, who was previously Liam Cahill, I can't remember the name of the new woman yet, but, you know, who are going to be sending this, and it's going to be contradictory behaviour. So there's also a number of ICBs who are in control measures. I'm going to just try and break them down based on how the NHS looks at them. But this also applies to the local systems or ICBs, ICSs, and the trusts as well within their landscape. So if we look at systems, right? So let's start at the top. And again, I mean ICSs or ICBs. So if we look at ones who are doing well, there are 0 out of 42. There is not a single system which is considered by NHS England to be doing well and can be left alone, right? Just take a second to think about that. This is your market. Next one, light touch support. Bit of friendly help here and there. Just, you know, you're not doing terribly. We don't need to start intervening, but you're kind of doing okay enough that we're not starting to kind of come to you and saying, right, sit down and give us your plan, right? That's 13 out of 42. So it's under half, right? So if we break them in half here, right? The organisations who are good, ideal customers, 13 out of 42 areas. The next level is the diagnostic stock take, and I will provide a list on how you can get a breakdown of these in a following slightly ugly slide. Apologies. So the diagnostic stock take means that they may be getting consultancies in, they're concerned, they're worried, and generally most of the reasons that this is happening is because of financial situation. The other areas might be safety or clearly poor quality leadership. There's been a couple of those, but it's largely financial. So that's 25, and what that means is that they might be under pressure to drive greater cost saving measures. And the final one is the recovery support program. And that is effectively a wraparound program where the organisation has lost the confidence of the national system. The national system has stepped in and intervened and is basically managing the leaders in that organisation. So suddenly that thick line for these independent organisations comes down and takes control of them, and generally sends in big consultancy companies because, of course, like that's what you do. You send a big consultancy company because they are proven to make everything better immediately, right? He doesn't say of any facetiousness. In terms of the trust, it's a slightly rosier, but not necessarily rosy landscape. So 27 are all okay in being left alone. I suppose for many of these, I reckon that from a quick glance, these are the university teaching ones. You've got other revenue streams who are the Oxbridge kind of, ones that have lots of different things. They're more commercial. They actually have the ability to pull in revenue from other areas. And, for example, if you take Cambridge and Peterborough and Addenbrooke's, in that area. For the light touch support, that's about 75. Again, I don't need to go through the categories. The diagnostic stock take is 82, and the recovery support program was 81-22, but someone's just changed over the last few weeks. So it's now 21 hospitals that are in the recovery support program. So 27 ideal customers, or up from a financial perspective, 21 very much unideal, potentially even unviable customers, arguably. In terms of these, we've got additional announcements to reduce the ICB operating costs, which will affect a number of things at a system level. And I think in particular, it's going to be interesting to see, and this is a slightly geeky point, but how recovery support changes, right? Because if NHS England isn't really there that much anymore, then how are they going to be supported? And actually, the Right Honourable Patricia Hewitt just said the other day that it's literally like, how on earth are they going to be supported for this area last week? So this is a really important feature because it actually means it's something where you need to really have a think about, right, what am I talking to them about? Now, I did say, theoretically, these aren't ideal systems. And they might, however, be your ideal customer if you have a very clear, demonstrable, verified and validated in-year ROI story where you can drive down and produce savings. That might make them your first ideal customers because the consultancy companies will go, great, if you implement this, you can get this much money back by the end of the financial year. That's not many tech companies. That's not many companies. Most organizations can't produce in-year savings. But if that's you, then actually this is really important. And I'd be flipping that target a little bit and thinking about them. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So I'm not going to spend too much time on these because basically they make me feel like slightly weird because they're so ugly, but there's a link down and I assume that the link will be sent after in terms of to these. But if we look at this, the picture's not necessarily great. There's 4 which I've listed here: Devon, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin are probably financially the worst performing, and the recent addition, which is Lancashire. So we move on to the next slide. Here's all of the list of the highest level trusts. Again, if you go to this, you can download a spreadsheet or 2 spreadsheets, one for systems, one for providers and trusts, and you can actually get these. But as you'll see in the beautiful chart that we have here, it's very much even Steven, so it's kind of split. But actually, it'd be interesting to see how this goes because the general trend over the last 2 to 3 years is very few are going in a good direction. They tend to be just kind of slipping. And so, it could be that these numbers start to go down to level 3 or 4 more, depending on how it looks. So next slide. So that is the system, and that's how and where we are. So the very first thing is there's a number of factors that will matter to your customer, which necessarily kind of may absolutely include some of the elements that Dom's been showcasing in Stotles that you can definitely use to get it. But actually, there are other elements that you probably need to be able to think about. And so the first one, as we've just covered, is their financial position and targets, like what they'd be at. And that might be their budget and their spend and what's allocated. Like, there are no drops at the moment. There is a rumour that there might be some funding drops at some particular point. I can't give any more information about that, but there is a rumour. But at the moment, there's no special sort of ring fence bits of money for technology within a lot of the systems. The next one is the level of intervention, because that means how much autonomy they have and whether someone's going through with a red pen. If you're going to a level 4 system or provider and you don't have a clear ROI story, you'll just be thrown in the bin, so you're wasting your time really. And they're not going to be creating buying signals because they can't afford to buy it. They're looking for savings. The next one is their role in the local system. And I suppose many people assume that a hospital is a hospital, but actually, like, generally what you get is some areas where you've got like a big Cambridge and Addenbrooke's, sort of Cambridgeshire University hospitals, and they are the big player. They've got loads of power in the system, and they have a lot of control within ICB, similar in how Guy's and St Thomas focuses in South East London, Manchester University hospitals, etc., right? And the other ones might be that there's a collection, a sort of a smorgasbord of providers. There may even be 2 smaller trusts and so on, which means that the system has a different role, because that might affect who's buying, and it might also affect about whether they can go to the ICB. If, for example, you're going for something that's trust-facing and you want to go to an ICB, and you want them to take it to the ICB for funding, that will really depend on what their status is. If they're really powerful, it's more likely that they'll get it. And if we looked at recent funding trends, such as the Unified Tech Fund a few years ago, generally I was working with community providers, and it was very difficult to be able to kind of get that money for those who are the smaller trusts. Their most pressing matters in their board minutes. What are they talking about? What are their concerns? Now, this might affect the buying signals that you can obviously get through Stotles, but then secondly, it may also illustrate what is the best conversation you should be having and how your narrative should be reorganized in terms of prioritization and what you do. And finally, is this new system with reshaping and cuts? Are they merging? Are they going to be preserving their digital team, since tech is one of the 3 pillars, or are they going to be just gutting it because it's the easiest thing to get right, because otherwise they're getting rid of their clinical teams? This is the kind of stuff where actually you want to be trying to get this information to understand how they're responding, because it will show you whether they're a good customer or not. So this, as I've said here, will shape where and how you approach the autonomy that they have and the financial routes, which will take us on to how you should be thinking about this. So the first one, as we've said, proactivity. Understand your market, understand all of their terms and their terminology, get the intelligence that you can through Stotles and through other means, and then think about 2 things. 1, segmentation, breaking down who your market is, right? Breaking down where they are. And actually this will also help you to be able to think about your addressable markets and the other kind of things that you need to speak to investors and the up-toppers as well, right? So first you need to be thinking about who, what are their profiles, what are things they want to talk about, and then personalizing, which is the how and how you approach them and what the potential route might be, right? If you've got an ROI thing, your approach might be for a finance director. If you've got a quality thing and it's an organization that's better off financially, then that's a conversation with the clinical team, and it will differ. Ideally, you want to get to the same objective, but as we go on to the next slide, it will have different components that you need to consider. So you need to think about who to approach, who will respond better to what narrative, what is the story that you can bring. And my clients, we work on multiple stories or elements or components or, sort of Lego block approaches where we go, oh, who are they? Let's think about them. Right, let's reorganize the priorities and change the story for this. And also who just generally is viable, right? How to connect and empathize, how to lead relevant thinking in a way that hits their biggest, and I'm using value proposition here, what's their jobs, their pains and their gains, what's the things they need to do, what's the things that are driving them mad, and what's the things that they're aspiring to do. There's less maybe aspiration nowadays, it's probably jobs and pains, but you always still got to think about those gains. And finally, how to make that case in the most strategically relevant way. When I talk about making the case, I don't mean a last dash run around to scratch together some business case, which is your most important document, as we'll come to. I mean actually starting with that as part of your narrative, so you're driving good thought leadership. Okay, next slide. So you need a market strategy. And I had a bit of a moan at someone who I met with, and they went, oh yeah, we don't need a strategy yet. They had no strategy, they had no plan. We don't need a strategy yet. Like, when we've won this area, we'll have a think about a strategy. And I was like, you're not going to win without a strategy. You're not going to you've got to think strategically about getting into the NHS. And hopefully part of that strategy will also include using a tool like Stotles, probably Stotles, because it's the best one that I know of, right? So you need to make sure that you've got this, because in this difficult NHS, you've got to be the best that you can possibly be. You've got to respect the NHS. I don't think we respect it enough. And if you were going to climb Everest or surf the biggest wave, you wouldn't kind of rock up and kind of go, oh, I've got this surfboard that's got a fin missing, here we go, let's crack on and see how it goes. It would break you. And the NHS is just the same. It's one of the most challenging health systems. It's a wonderful health system and I love it as a geek, but it's really, really important to make sure that you're thinking about the NHS as something which is your biggest trial and that you're ready for it. Next slide. So, very first one, know your customer. And this might be not just knowing who you think your customer is, but actually who owns the problem. Where does that live? You've got to know your local system. You've got to know how they play together, because actually, Otherwise, you might be passed from pillar to post. Oh no, it's not them, and you end up in this ping pong thing where they're all passing it around. So you might need to know them enough to have a narrative to say, well, this is why it's yours, but if we worked with you on this and it led to outcomes, then we could maybe take that for a co-funding thing to the ICB. You know, that might be something that you might have to have as a conversation. And you can only do that by understanding the different entities within this. Next slide. And their funding roads. So also knowing thy changing system, the provider and the stakeholder, because there are different actors who play different roles in really good procurements. Generally, there are people who really give a shit the most about the thing that you are solving. They really care about it. And then you've got the people up top who are impassive about it, and they're thinking about populations and groups and stuff like that. And that can happen in a provider that's thinking about business or a system too. So there's multiple elements that you've got to really think about. And then, of course, we have stakeholders, people who can create problems or who you don't get to meet, who might be doing some kind of governance process, or might be some local power pocket that stops you being supported because they have a different agenda or they haven't been engaged enough to understand. Next slide. So, knowing who supports a problem and who pays a problem, i.e. who your customer is and your market is super, super important. And hopefully if they're writing strategies and they're involved in board level documents, of course it's the seniors who are involved in board docs. So unfortunately there is this hidden under the iceberg level of the buying signals that we'd absolutely love, that aren't just available unless you sit there and freedom of information request them, and there's no quicker way to make enemies than sending them an FOI. Never do it yourself. So you've got to know who supports. So who is required to deliver against a problem and who is actually owns the problem and pays for it, because actually your market might be multifaceted. There might be different elements that you need around this. Next slide. So this is what I would call your micros, your macros, and your milestones, and they all want to think about different things. Ideally, you need to make sure that you have a narrative that includes all of those things, that considers the objections that some of these may have, the things that the tensions that they may have internally. These are all important elements that you're going to need to make sure that you're doing within this, particularly if what you're putting together is something that's clinical. If it's clinical, you have to have a narrative that engages the FD and the clinical team in the same conversation. And by that conversation, I mean that's consistently runs through to your business case all the way through. Like I always start with the business case, move it back, and then craft the narrative from that, because that's what wins stuff. Next slide. One of the things I say to all of my clients, I'm giving you a bit of this is kind of like a tasting menu of amuse-bouches here, but I'll explain why in a moment, right? Is like, there is generally a point with every single one of my clients, and there's been a lot of them, where I sit down and I say, look, it's not fair. It's not how it should be. But if you want to get through, you've got to do it all for them. You've got to change their hearts and minds. You've got to help them know how to lead it internally. You've got to give them the templates and the documents. You've got to do all the legwork. Because in this system, everyone's under stress, everyone's under pressure, and you are not the only person they're speaking to. There are thousands of companies who are vying for some funding and for some budgets, and they're all there, pick me, pick me. And the ones who might get through are the most convenient ones and the easy ones often. They go, I'm so stressed, I've got so much going on, I don't have time to sit down and work out how to do all of these things that my bureaucratic governance process is asking. So who's got it all laid out? Who can give me the confidence that I can just go and fill some things in, change a few bits, and then send it through, and I can confidently see that this is gonna work out well. So, making sure that you're saving them time and work and doing that legwork is absolutely critical. Next slide. The other thing, which many organizations, which is kind of like a sort of secret thing that's going on in the environment, is that actually the NHS might sometimes be nervous about it if you do it wrongly, or if you come up and sort of, like a bull in a china shop. But actually the NHS is very familiar with trade-offs, gain shares, risk shares. They're very much, you do something and I do something. And actually, if you're in one of those smaller companies that's looking to get as much as you can, so you can have lighthouse areas and show off what you've got, so you can then go from 1 to 2 to 5 to 10 to 50 to, well, it's not 50 in ICBs, but, just to the moon, as far as you can go. Then it might mean that in order to fast track that, you need to illustrate what the value exchange is for them. Similarly, we have an NHS which is absolutely looking at incentives and particularly first and second customers or a new thing. There's definitely deals that can be made, and legal teams are very often quickly pulled into that, because a lot of these organizations are thinking, there's a possibility we might get an ROI from this. That's very interesting. And so, exchange and reward, trade-off and incentive is super important within this. Next slide. The most important thing within all of this is that you have not just a business case, that you use a template again because you want to make it as easy as possible, and all kinds of other helpful docs they need. But actually, as it happens in a month, I'm chairing this for the NHS Innovation Accelerator to get together a bunch of CFOs and health tech companies to talk about this. But there are 3 critical elements that form part of every good story. If I was working in an ICB, one of the first questions I'd be like is, okay, that's fine. Let me see your business case. I want to see your business case now and see how ready you are. Because if you go, oh, and can I have it in 24 hours? Because if you haven't got something ready, I wouldn't want to work with you. I wouldn't want to have that there. And there's 3 components that you need in this great case that works all the way through from day one in your narrative. Because why would you have an inconsistent narrative? A powerful NHS change story that's heart, mind, relevant factors like financial savings, that you've got the economics sorted, that you're trying to help them understand that. And I don't mean some fluffy national, read some of my articles about this I've been writing recently, but like fluffy national sort of UK society getting people back into jobs, health economics. I mean ROI, productivity, risk avoidance, spend avoidance, costed risk avoidance, these kind of things that you can actually break down and profile for them, because that's what every FD is looking for to give the rubber stamp to a case that's going through. And of course, the pragmatics, that you know what to do, that you're safe, that you can give them confidence, and that you're not going to create loads of risk and hard work for them. If you haven't got a business case, and you're like, there's a lot of bigger companies here, if you haven't got a business case that you're using for the beginning of your narrative, then you really need to make sure that you're getting on that as quickly as possible. And I know business case season starts in September, late September, early October. I'd be writing it right now because I'll be using it for these conversations, but I would also make sure I had that ready to launch at that particular point. Next slide. So I've really whizzed through a number of things that I hope that is valuable in terms of you putting this on your radar. But one of the things that I've done during PERDAR, because it was all a bit quiet and my partner was pregnant and I was looking to use it to spend some time having out in the world whilst I had a little new baby to sort of rock about. I've put together a course. It's a self-learning course. You can be on it by 1 o'clock, and the net promoter score I've got is pretty much perfect. It's got about 4.8 out of 5. It's pretty much got 10s out of 10s by everybody who's done it. And this is 8 hours of information done in a weird, wacky, AI-generated way with loads of freaky-ass pictures of me and laser eyes and sound effects and film stuff that I've put in to make it as fun as possible, right? It is not an e-learning course. I would be very clear. It's something very different. If you don't know the difference between an ICB and a provider and the different kinds of trusts, if you don't know how the funding flows works from that, you absolutely need that. Every single area that I have just covered, which is an absolute essential that you need, is covered on this course, brought together. If we go to the next slide, brought together to make sure that you have a cohesive strategy, and not a strategy for future stuff, a future for now stuff, for winning in September and October, about how you can take an asset-driven approach when people won't engage with you, how to convince them, and what to try and convince them about what they need, to understand who supports and who pays, how to influence them and to not look like an alien or a weird private sector bunch of tech bros, right? How to look and feel proven and help them feel proof amongst compliance and evidence, how to structure your offering in order to make them feel, do you have a big vision, AI changing the world, or do you have the most boring thing? Like, how do you find something that helps you to ratchet up? Understanding the sales year and how you should do this all the way through. What are the times of year you should be doing this? When are they busy? When's a terrible time to talk to them? Commercial fast track routes, how to deal with objections. And there are a lot. Strategic, there's all different kinds of objections. And finally, the business case, all brought together. And as I had on the previous slide, I think that the link has already gone out, but the first 10 organizations who go for it, it's a bloody good price. Everyone tells me it's a really good price, particularly for what you get. I'm giving 20% off to the first 10, and the race is on to get that one. So I think that was my last slide, wasn't it? Was there another slide after that?
That is the last one. But Liam, before you jump on, I'm just curious, going back to the initial polling of emotions and emojis, wondering where you're at right now. What emoji would you be?
I know the NHS inside out. I'm curious and excited. And look, I'll be honest, it's been hard for a few years, right? And in 2021, lots of companies appeared and they're all there going, oh yeah, we're just going to win the NHS and we're going to scale and stuff like that. And I was like, it's a bubble. It's not going to last. I built an organization by good, hard work, understanding. We lived and breathed the NHS. We were one of them. They knew it. They trusted us. They had confidence. We did everything that we need to do. And that's what we got to 100%, not just of English NHS, but the whole UK NHS. And they never left. They never left us because we did everything we needed to keep them as well. I'm excited now because, to be honest, for a number of years, a company just thought, oh, just give me an intro. And there was enough people out there who were promising an intro. I think now as a market, it's super exciting time because actually, look, let's be honest. Digital was always never going to work if it was all add-on, add-on, add-on. We can't afford to add on. None of us want to pay any more taxes. Now's the time that we create a credible and great BAU, business as usual conversation and do this hard work. And actually, I love that my clients are recognizing this. I love that my audience and people who are reading my articles are recognizing this, and those who are taking my course. And actually, I'm really excited because this is when the real transformation happens, right? This is when we do the good work, but we've got to do great work to do the good work. And so I'm excited. You know, yes, it's hard. Yes, it's tiring. Yes, all of this stuff going on with the government at the moment is irritating and confusing. And the way they've done it means that we've got a month or two of not knowing exactly what's going to happen. But I might be the only person who would have put an excited emoji on this, to be honest, because this is how you build credible, sustainable businesses, you know. So, yeah.
Excited. Nice. With that excitement, will we jump into the Q&A? See what people are asking.
Love that.
10 upvotes. What do you think, Liam? We gotta get this one moved.
Are we going on the Nando's one?
Why not?
I don't know, but there's 10 that have said this. Like, if you're NHS prospects, will go for dinner, right? You know, like some of them won't accept a coffee. CIOs tend to be a bit more okay about that. I know it wasn't a serious question, but yeah.
It's a good intro, though, and thanks for answering it. I guess next top one, only with 4 upvotes. What is the best way to build relationships across the NHS? There's so many decision makers. I guess we sort of touched on in bits and pieces. Maybe, Liam, you could start, and Dom, if you've any thoughts after that.
Yeah, like, firstly, the relationship that matters most to most of your buyers is what someone's down the road has done, right? They are most interested in being a fast follower and doing what someone else. So to get that confidence that they're not taking risk in a difficult landscape, the best way to build relationships is firstly through good lighthouses for people who are advocating for you, and maybe that you've got very secure and tangible agreements that that you've done in order to make that happen. Secondly, you need to not be an alien. You can't turn up and tell them all about your investors and stuff like that. Like, they don't care. Actually, it probably puts them off. Like, there's a number of things that will scare them off. And so making sure that you seem familiar, that you understand them. Like, let's say you've just used Stotles, right? You've gone through, you understand the key parts. What are the biggest strategies? What are the things that we need to know? And you go through and your approach is, I understand this is going on. You've just had this going on. Like, if I was sitting down with any organization, I would make sure within the first 10 seconds of that conversation, I had really taken my time to understand them, because it shows I can have a credible conversation with them. So peers, peer influence and leverage and stuff like that. But being able to show that you're one of them and you're not someone who they can't trust. Like, trust is always the key to any relationship, right?
And then I think just to tag on to that, obviously, yeah, you want to understand the key priorities, the strategies, but identifying the actual people to speak to can also be a problem, right? There's so many people within these ICBs and trusts. I mean, maybe getting cut down if the workforce is decreasing, but really this is like the key part of sales, is knowing your ICP, your ideal customer profile. So knowing if you've got experience selling previously, who were the people in that sales cycle that were making decisions, what messaging resonated with who, and this goes back to sort of Liam's point of crafting the messaging that a CFO is going to care about versus a CDIO versus, more of an end user. So that's a really important part of sort of identifying the key decision makers, is knowing the personas you want to reach out to and the messaging that's going to resonate with them as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Tom. Okay, moving on to the next one. Following an evaluation, what's the best way to go about securing ICB funding to adopt what is a key focused clinical disease area and prevention program? Okay, I'm not sure if that is something we can get into, but maybe not.
I'm happy to answer if you think it's relevant. So,
please.
firstly, what is your evaluation, right? Like, you know, the organization I built, it was in like meds and prescribing. We're people who came and said, oh, you should prescribe this because it's rat study. And you're just like, yeah, rats aren't humans. I'm sorry. Like, that's not a sufficient evaluation. So firstly, depending on what the evaluation is, if we could just keep that question up for a second, because I think there's a couple of components in that, right? So firstly, have you done a good enough evaluation that covers the things that matters most? Yeah, you need to measure what matters in your evaluation. If you've done an evaluation, you haven't measured how it affects the productivity of a team, but you're trying to tell them it's a productivity improver, then that's not a good enough evaluation. So I want to qualify what we mean by evaluation here. You know, if it's something which is around economics, then you've got to make sure that it's something that you can use to say, well, this is what your flow through is, and this is what this looks like, right? So let's say you've got that. The best way around securing to adopt is, firstly, like so the second element is this something that they know they need? Someone nationally is telling them that they need? Is it something that is relevant to what they're looking for? Because that changes their profile, right? So firstly, if they are actively looking for it, then it may be that you are, you know, using Stotles and so on to get that market information that is there, that, you know, that they're asking for it. If they're not asking for it, you've got to convince them. You've got to thought lead them. Like, you know, if your market in a clinical sense is in a particular disease area, is it's not high enough priority. Like, I'll give you an example with a group of my clients. What we just did is we got together all of the leading neurologists in the country and charities and stuff like that to push for why epilepsy tech should be prioritized, because it's not prioritized enough. So we've tried to do some work in order to lead the thinking with a group of, as before, peers and so on, to affect that. So who can influence them? You know, who are the people who can be involved in that? I think, you know, if they're not looking for that, you've got to create a case for them to explain why they should look for that. But if they're not looking for it and that you can't convince them, then there's no market, it doesn't exist, and you should go somewhere else, right? Like, that's as simple as it is. Finally, prevention's a hard one. I've got clients that work in prevention. It is a difficult one because generally return investment is long term. It's all about cost per qualities and stuff like that. And, you know, generally that's a really challenging thing to kind of put forward. So, you know, what I'd be saying is look at the NHS strategy, because there's 3 pillars, which is shift to community, treatment, prevention, and technology. And if you're a tech company that works in the area of prevention, then you tick 2 out of those 3 boxes, right? So, like, also watch and wait and see for what's going on in May.
Fantastic. Thanks for jumping on that. I guess where we pull our contract and tender data from, all from public sources. If you are interested in learning like where specifically we pull from, do reach out to us. We can obviously walk you through that. Let me see. Next question. Don't you think end clients primarily seek the lowest price? So does all the legwork really help? I think that's an interesting question, Liam.
Yeah, there's like a lot of like, look, you know, pricing scoring is overweighted. Like, that's how it is at the moment. It's a real challenge. Everyone recognizes it's a real challenge. Like, if you go for a tender and you write an okay tender that says like why you're better, like, then realistically they're going to go for price. If you're reactive and you're trying to put a case where it's lowball in that, again, what I would be doing is trying to get in there first. And, you know, this is the kind of thing that's hard to do through delivery partners and third-party vendors and stuff like that, if that's you. But like, I'd be trying to help them to set their criteria so there are less who can compete on lower price and trying to affect that, right? So, you know, strategic need, what are the priorities, what are the strategic criteria, and why do we support it, that may help you to do it. So yes, you might need to be more proactive on that. I've seen lots of my clients win stuff and it hasn't been based on price, and they've won it against other lowest prices. Like, as an example, AccuRx is winning contracts left, right and center at the moment in primary, and they're not doing it from the lowest price, right? The reason is because all the GPs in that local area say, no, we want AccuRx, right? So it's not all down to price, but if you leave it to like the tender duking it out, then yeah, it will be down to price and you won't get any business. So the legwork does really help, but you need to convince them why and to be able to outline that well.
Absolutely. Dom, I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on this from, I guess, speaking with suppliers in the market, and then obviously similarly with the second question that's there as well, like, you know, startups and SMEs, maybe how you feel they're getting on.
Yeah, well, I think on the first one, like Liam summarized it really well there, like proactivity, understanding their priorities, being able to speak to those, and some of it, yeah, is education and helping them to understand why, you know, you are the best solution for them. goes a really long way. So that legwork is actually really important to avoid that situation of just a race to the bottom on price. Yeah, on that second one, is the NHS receptive to solutions from startups? I mean, the short answer is yes. I worked in a startup selling to the NHS. We won business with over 50% of all of the ICBs in the country. So in my experience and from people I speak to, absolutely. But it comes down to, are you aligning yourself with their priorities? Are you able to help them with their key? They'll normally have two or three top strategies that they actually care about, they really need to solve. If you're aligning to those, and like we were saying, you have like a really strong business case put together with referenceability and case studies, then yeah, they're absolutely happy to work with a startup. I don't know if Liam has anything to add to that as well.
Probably a couple of words, just shortly. I think the NHS is receptive to startups that act like organisations that are legitimate, not organisations who act like startups. And I think, in the startup community, there's a lot of hype about startupiness and stuff like that, right? Like, if you're a good startup and you are going and putting across a really credible case, then it shouldn't matter as much. But they're used to dealing with bigger companies and incumbents who know how to do it, right? So yeah, they can do it with organizations who are functionally startups, but if you act like them, then maybe less so.
Fantastic. I assume this next question is specifically for you, Liam, on the business case templates. So.
Yes, on my course, I do. I've got a beautiful one, and I also spend about an hour teaching it in that. So the yes, and it's glorious.
Nice. Fantastic. Frameworks mentioned. Yeah, we mentioned one CCS framework. You mentioned apart from G-Cloud. So G-Cloud is currently live, not open to any new suppliers joining, but yes, there's plenty of frameworks out there focused on, health services, health-related services, tech, all, being procured through by the NHS and relevant buyers. But yeah, please just reach out and we can obviously give you more information on these. Cool. How will the recent changes in NHS organization predictably affect the digital health market in the UK? Wow, this seems like a broad one. Liam, would you like to tackle that?
Well, one, see previous comments about the strategy come in. We will see, because we haven't got the full picture, and anyone else, anyone who's got finite and definitive views about this probably doesn't understand stuff. Like, the answer is that everybody I know who knows lots is going, we need to see the strategy, right? So ask again in May. But look, it's a squeeze. It's going to be a squeeze. There's a potential possibility that things will move quicker and that everyone will go, yes, like, we're going to slash red tape. That's a very big cultural change for systems. So I'm interested to see what mechanisms allow for that. But ultimately, if you think that your customer and the people who've got a certain amount of pretty limited bandwidth at the moment are about to become 50% of their size, then that has another effect as well. These are the factors that we can probably bet on. We can bet on people. 50% less people is not ideal. It's difficult to know what we're gonna see around that. There is also rumours that there's going to be a more slightly Napoleonic approach nationally to selecting opportunities and startups and funding it at the centre. Be interesting to see how they do that too with no staff. So there's lots of rumours circulating around, or I hear them all, and yeah, but rumours are rumours, right? We'll see.
No, I get you. So yeah, I see this one down here. You've covered the ICSs and ICB situation. I'm wondering, is there any points around spending more time on, I guess, the differences between buying from trusts versus ICSs? You already covered that.
Dom, do you want to give yours? I can give a point if don't.
Be super.
Yeah, so I mean, it still does come down to, at least in my opinion, understanding the priorities. ICSs, obviously the funding does flow down from, or ICSs, ICBs, to the trusts. So trusts are more localized, obviously caring about their specific area. ICSs are going to be more regional. But ultimately the strategies are normally going to align, at least in my experience. And again, it's going to depend on your specific product, service, what priorities are you speaking to. Some of them are going to be quite similar. Some of them are going to be different. I think the funding can be a big part. Sometimes trusts, or at least in my experience, trusts are a bit more likely to have specific things ring fenced that you could, if you put a strong business case together, you can win that business. Whereas I've seen ICBs, at least in my experience, quite reluctant to spend on things that were outside of things they'd already ring fenced.
Yeah. The key differentiator for me culturally is that a trust is there to serve business objectives, right? They do not hold a huge responsibility for the population that they serve, right? They are a provider. They are paid to be a provider, and their priorities are about provision. And so the biggest thing that you will see more in a trust is around business objectives. I cover this in huge amounts of detail in my course, by the way. Not too much, but just enough. And the ICBs or the ICSs, which are one and the same thing, like the ICBs hold a responsibility for the population. So if you take a trust and say, this patient will be less ill in 4 years' time, the trust has zero responsibility for that. They have responsibility for making sure that people come into A&E, get a bed, get treatment. People with cancer get treatment, right? So the system has a broader series of responsibilities in that area, and naturally, as the system, they are responsible for commissioning more. So, but ultimately, there will be someone at the top who's looking at things impassively and thinking about their priorities. They just have slightly different priorities between the two of them.
Gotcha. Yeah, thanks guys for answering that one. I guess the top question here, most recent one, is like, can we access which trusts hospitals are in each support segment? I guess, Liam, that ties back into one of your slides and the fact that we have a couple of links that we can share afterwards, so that the audience can dig in. So either reach out to Liam or we'll share that.
If you follow the link, you'll get 2 spreadsheets as a list of all of the organisations. So no need to reach out to me for access to a spreadsheet I've already shared a link for. So it's there.
Cool. I guess we're coming up, on time. So just a reminder to anyone still on the call, do you get your questions in now? We'll try and prioritize a couple before the end. Dom, I might throw this one to you around board minutes, given that you walked into documents. I was wondering, are they still relevant with changes going on in NHS?
I mean, I think this one depends. I do think they're relevant. They're a really, really powerful tool. Like board minutes, like Liam touched on as well. If you can find specific snippets, in my example, I was more looking at strategy and budgets, but yes, we hold board minute documents as well, and that's a really good way to identify specific decision makers and what the individuals care about. So understanding who to target. So currently, still really highly relevant. Obviously, if ICBs are downsizing and you're reading something from someone that's then no longer there at the ICB, I would say obviously that's not relevant. But overall, I think there's still a really, really powerful, relevant tool.
Like, also, like, realistically, the NHS strategy is changing, so strategies are going to change. Like, at this interim sort of no man's land between two government versions of the system, strategies might currently be less relevant, but at the very least, reading that strategy and saying, I'm aware that this was on your list and you were looking at this and this was a priority, are you expecting this will still be a priority, is better than turning up and going, hey, would you like to see this thing? So like, at the end of the day, it's relevant because it's part of the backstory and the legacy of them, so it's still very useful as a starting point, right?
So I see some people asking about the session recording and slides. Yes, they will all be made available after we wrap up. Let me see. So let me go through one or two more. So I guess how much, and this ties back in, I guess, Liam, with what you were walking through, like how much did the NHS care about the integration of empirical research and data on your product when making the business case?
They want to feel that you're low risk. And so they want to feel like, let me give it. So I work on the NHS side. I've worked with organisations where I've been in the business case room, the CFOs, like working, and the CEO and stuff like that, right? And everyone has violently agreed that something is needed, and then someone's gone, "But what's the ROI for this?" And then everyone's just kind of like, "Oh, we don't know." But they all agree that we should do it. But then 6 months go by because they've asked for some, for some description of this. The organisations at the moment want to feel safe. They want to feel certainty, rightly or wrongly. It's probably all a fictitious fantasy, but that's what they want to feel. And so the more robust and validatable, if that's a word, the things that you put down as fact in your case, the more likely they're going to treat it as that and feel more secure and confident.
Okay, thank you very much. Cool. Let's see what else we have here. So will this information mainly benefit medtech, health tech companies working with the NHS, or help other industries like construction and retrofit? Dom, if this is something you might want to jump in on,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this information can benefit any industries. We have multiple customers who sell it into the NHS across a whole bunch of medtech, health tech, consumables, pharmaceuticals, down to construction, retrofit. I guess there's some intricacies on which parts of the data is more useful. So for things like construction or retrofit, where it may be more likely to be a one-off, maybe a contract expiration, not quite as relevant, but the budget and strategy documents are a really powerful tool. And really, again, it still all comes down to understanding those buying signals really early, so you can be proactive, get ahead of those tenders, and be able to build that awareness and build those relationships within the account before it comes to tender. Because otherwise, again, we're into that race to the bottom. If you're just waiting for a tender to come out for a construction project, someone else has been pitching their services for the last year, and you're not going to win unless you massively lowball them.
Thank you. Sounds good. Let me have a scroll through here. Liam, if you see anything interesting as I scroll down.
I can hit a couple really quickly. So CIP is cost improvement program. For example, Queen Elizabeth King's Lynn in the east of England has to save 10% of their overall cost, right? So most organizations will have a cost improvement program. So in terms of that one, that's what it is. For new companies, the main focus on getting a case study or business development. If you don't have credible examples, you're not going to get business. So it depends on what you mean by business development, if it's pilots or something like that. Too many companies are trying to sell too early and they get nowhere. They just don't get business. So I would be looking at both, trying to have business development in order to do a well-structured pilot contract that has the features that allows you to then be enabled to do business development. So not just a case study, but more around it. Again, sorry to be a human plug here, but I cover all of this in my course in lots of information that will help you do it successfully. So,
Okay, well, maybe with that, that's comment there. I just want to say thank you so much, Liam, for sticking on the call and presenting. And Dom, thank you so much as well. This has been really useful. Obviously, we have dropped in Liam's course, the link to it a couple of times. We'll be sharing it after this call as well with the slides and recording. But yeah, guys, Liam, Dom, thank you so much. Really appreciate you guys joining the call.
Thanks,
everyone.
Final words from me. Dom highlighted this earlier on today, but we have battle packs for all. This is a mix of, I guess, data that our analysts and advisory team have pulled and put together into relevant, industry reports, framework intelligence, and upcoming NHS contract expiries. If you would like to book in a 15-minute consultation with one of our team to sort of walk down through what your priorities are, scan this QR code and we'll set up a short time to get you that battle pack. But I guess that's all from me today. I just want to say thank you all very much once again to the presenters and the speakers and to everyone who is on this call as attendees. Have a great day and speak to you all very soon.
Thanks.